Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show powered by Icon Plus. So really quickly for you, so Icon recently launched Bridge, a direct fiat on and off ramp service for all Icon dApps. So newcomers can now bank on Icon without even knowing that they are using blockchain. So very cool for the Icon network there. Now I want to say thank you to my sponsors, BlockFi. I use them to earn up to 8.6% interest on my USDC. So that is incredibly exciting. You can also get $250 when you sign up. So I'm going to leave the link for you somewhere and everywhere. And a last quick shout out before I bring on my guest to CoinFlip. So you can actually get 10% off their transactions. I'm going to leave a discount code running for you in a minute. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss any of these fantastic guests. Now, today is a pretty interesting guest. I'm very excited to bring him on. He is a podcaster. He's a YouTuber. It is, of course, BTC Sessions, also known as Ben. What's up, Ben?
Hey, I'm great. I'm super excited to be here, and there's just so much going on. So I can't wait to chat.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think we're really lucky to be going live right now because of what is going on. Now, let's just jump straight into it. I want to give the audience the juice, the chocolate, the cake straight away. I don't see any reason to hold back. So Gamestop, right? That is what's kind of taken the world by storm, not just the original traditional financial markets, but it's taken the crypto world by storm. So for those that don't know, I think back in March in 2020, it was trading at around $3.25. Now this week, I'm not sure what the price is right this second, but I think it hit above $150. So GameStop is one of those companies which have just been unfortunately declining. So tell us, why is it going up? Explain what is happening.
Well, okay. So one of the things that has happened here is, I mean, GameStop, yes, I will grant that the model, it's maybe a model that's on its way out, right? Like the physical locations where you go to pick up physical games, things are going very much digital. That said, people still go there. I've still gone there from time to time and still utilize it, but these guys have been effectively shorted by a lot of these hedge funds, saying that the stock is going to crater. But it's the amount that they've been shorting this stock, betting that the stock will go down, that is of particular interest. So they were able to short this stock for 140%, which means 40% more than the total outstanding shares. They were able to take the opposite side of that bet. So what ended up happening is a group of people on Reddit, known as Wall Street Bets, saw this as an opportunity, and they said, well, hey, you know, these guys typically get to set the rules and they get to do whatever the hell they want, whenever the hell they want to do it. And there's always just no repercussions for these guys. If they screw up bad enough, they will get bailed out by the banks. And so what they said is, let's just go buy the hell out of GameStop and pump it through the roof. And actually that price point, I've seen much higher. I've seen it over 300. I think at one point it was over $400. Like it's insane. So everybody went in and they were just pumping the hell out of the stock, and these hedge funds were losing billions of dollars. And so what ended up happening is some of the investors in Robinhood app, where a lot of people are buying this stock, are also in bed with the hedge funds that were shorting GameStop. So Robinhood has removed GameStop as an option to trade. So what you can do is, if you own GameStop, you can sell it, but you cannot buy more. So they've given a one-way street to retail investors, while hedge funds can strategically mitigate the risk and reallocate so that they're safe, which never happens if somebody in retail is losing money. Oh no, the little guy's losing money. Don't worry, we'll stop the market so you guys can get out okay. That has never happened ever. And when's the last time you saw this, the trading of any asset shut down because it was going up too much? Never, until the big guys are losing the money. I love everything that is happening here because there's this growing swell of kind of screw the elites at the top that don't get to play by the rules. They get to privatize the gains and they get to socialize the losses by getting bailouts, which are paid for by taxpayers or paid for by inflation, which is a hidden tax on regular citizens. So, you know what? This lines up perfectly with the ethos of Bitcoin and what I'm interested in, and more power to them. I think that these guys, they've got the right mindset. I think that they're poking the bear. they're
Yeah,
they're
literally.
they're definitely stirring stuff up. But I think what we're seeing now with everybody effectively being shut out of buying this because it's stepped on the wrong toes is that the whole thing is effectively rigged for the big boys at the top. And the little guys don't have much of a chance if they play in their playground. What I'm waiting for is for these guys to start to recognize the underlying problem, because right now they're attacking kind of the symptoms. And I guess we can look back to, say, 2008 in the financial crisis, right? You had a bunch of people playing with other people's money, making very, very risky bets. And they were doing this because they didn't think they would get burned. But then when they did get burned, there was actually zero consequence because we spun up the money printers and we funneled all that new money back to make them whole again. And everybody else got left footing the bill. The reason that was possible is because the underlying currency itself can do that. You have the function of being able to turn on those money printers and allocate capital where, you know, the people at the top see fit. And when you get down to it, we're seeing this play out. It's shining a spotlight on the actual problem. Right now, these guys are attacking kind of the symptoms of the underlying problem, but Bitcoin is very much born from that same ethos of there's something systemically wrong and we can't fix the system. We can just create a better one. That's why we're here.
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, you explained that beautifully. So absolutely well done. I thought that was explained really, really well. I think, you know, especially, so firstly, there are two things going on here. I think you have obviously what's going on Reddit. You have the group sort of pumping up the price of it. But then you have what we've seen today, Robinhood actually sort of jumping in, right? And I think this is going to be the most insane thing for the space because it really shows the need for decentralization. And you have a lot of young people, right, on apps like TikTok. So on TikTok, you literally have people talking about different stocks. You know, there's a whole niche for Generation Z, like not just millennials, but Generation Z wanting to get into the stock market because I think they are sort of switched on that the game is rigged. You know, we don't really want the 9 to 5. There must be a better way. You know, we've seen those videos coming onto Twitter, people sort of saying like, you know, look what the big guys are doing. We've got to do better. You know, we're seeing them sort of talking about these things, but we're not seeing them make that jump into crypto because crypto is still sort of seen as this, let's just say, I don't know, this dark criminal sort of community or whatever it is. But wow, the whole deep, like, you know, it goes into like the whole deplatforming, it goes into the whole banning, and it really just makes a case for cryptocurrency. I think, you know, this is why we need decentralized applications. This is why we need somebody that just isn't in charge. You know, no one single point of failure, no one single centralized authority. Do you think though that this is going to be a real opportunity for these kind of people, this kind of market to move into crypto?
I think it's going to take time. I think, I think that you'll see some people start to get it, but it's a journey, right? Like these people, they manage to find a chink in the armor of the guys at the top, but in doing so, these guys have effectively said, "You're out. You know, if you do something we don't like, we will just stop it in its tracks." And so the connection is there to be made. And I see some people on Twitter already making that connection, obviously with a bunch of Bitcoiners behind them saying, hey, you know, poking and prodding. But I mean, yeah, it's amazing. Good for these guys. Screw the guys at the top. I let it burn. Honestly let it burn. Yeah. And the other beautiful thing about this is there's not a lot that the left and the right can agree on. But you know what I've seen, and I tend to in terms of especially like monetary policy and like the how to fix some of the problems in our system, I tend to lean a little right on that. But I've seen that some opposite ends of the spectrum. You have like AOC and like Robert Reich, who was an advisor to Clinton, coming out and calling out the same BS, saying, how can Robinhood shut down regular people from buying a stock while the hedge funds are allowed to trade it like nothing has happened and mitigate all their risk while everybody else gets put out? It's just, there's a double standard here, and both sides of the spectrum see it. It's just how they approach dealing with it. You know, I think on the left, it leans towards more regulations, which I think can be loopholed eventually, as they have been. And on the right, it tends to lean towards deregulation, which can hurt in the short term because scammers can get in there. But in my opinion, I think the only way around this is becoming anti-fragile as a system and as an individual, because if you get burned, you're going to learn from that and you're not going to make that mistake again. So
I think that's such a cool observation, that the left and the right sort of agree on it, because I think, you know, at the end of the day, I often find when it comes to politics, we all sort of want the same goal. We just have different ways of getting there. And at the end of the day, so I'm the same as you. I fiscally tend to be far more conservative and on the right. But we all sort of want let's call it a level playing field. We all want fairness. We all, you know, especially the left, that's sort of what their foundations are, right? And to think that the little man is absolutely getting screwed is quite unbelievable and insane. So you mentioned something earlier, which I just want to kind of, I guess, echo and point out a little bit more. So Robinhood banning the trading of this. So you said they were in bed with people on Wall Street. What's the connection there? So did this come from Wall Street or did it come from Robinhood? What's the connection? Yeah,
so one of the major, I just saw it. It was on an article. It was one of the little disclaimers underneath it. But I can't remember which. I think it was, what's the name of the hedge fund that was getting
Marvin Capital.
Melvin or
Melvin,
yeah.
Sorry, Melvin.
Yeah,
Melvin Capital.
Yeah, Melvin. So they have money that they've funneled into Robinhood. They helped with and have funded Robinhood itself. So of course, like, given that they have money in the game of Robinhood, or rather that Robinhood at least has some influence from Melvin Capital, of course that's going to be the influence that comes down there.
Isn't that even like illegal though? Like, how can you? I'm just sort of thinking, like, I'm just trying to, I couldn't get my words out. Okay, sorry, we'll get my words out. So how is that even legal, right? Like, it's supposed to be a fair trading platform. So how can one of the biggest, I don't know if they're the biggest, but how can such a huge company have such an investment in a platform? It literally means the game is rigged. Like, how can you do that? It's not insider trading, but it's a little bit like insider trading in some way. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer to this, I suppose, would just be more complete transparency on what everybody does. And, you know, we don't typically get that. And also complete and free access to anybody for all of those tools. If you have transparency and access for everyone, then you can't screw somebody else with an unfair advantage. And so we're at this place where there's a set of rules for a certain group of people and there's a set of rules for another group of people, and the spotlight has been shone on it. And I'm sure this isn't the first or the last that we're going to be hearing about this. And I think the fallout from this, whatever that snowballs into, it's going to be felt for some time. And there's going to be a lot of questions about this moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's something that the left and right can agree on. I mean, I know AOC has a huge amount of influence, so this should be fun. I'm excited. But let's talk a little bit more about you. So, you know, everything in crypto is very much American centric. I think most of my audience are based in America. You know, SEC, everything's America, right? Nothing else matters, but you're Canadian. So,
yes.
And I can really hear it in your accent. It's funny. I can hear the out and the about. I can hear it. So teach me a little bit about what it's like in Canada. You know, what's it like in terms of its approach to cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. So I mean, for the most part, it's relatively friendly in terms of a regulatory environment. So most of now, I will say it's a little bit tighter than typical money transmitting laws, but the laws here are anything above $1,000 requires an ID. Normally for cash like transactions, that is 3,000. So we're a little bit below that. Not ideal, but better than the worst of the worst. And then anything above $10,000, which is across the board for any type of asset, is the anti-money laundering laws come into effect. So you need more ID and proof of where the funds came from, things like that. So across the board, it's relatively friendly. Like it's not too cumbersome here. It's pretty open. So that's all good. Now, in terms of the government itself and how it operates and like how we operate our money, I would say Canada is kind of a shining beacon for why Bitcoin exists in our monetary policies. I mean, don't get me wrong, the US takes the cake because holy crap. But
pretty much.
So right now, for example, the Bank of Canada, and keep in mind that the size of Canada, we're like 30 million plus people. So we're like the size of California in terms of actual people living here. But right now, the Bank of Canada has stated that it will effectively print or introduce liquidity into the market at a rate of at least $4 billion per week.
Which is for how long? Sorry, for how long?
For as long as it takes. They said until the market is stable and inflation targets are met.
Have you done a calculation of how much that is a year, or?
I would have to napkin math right now.
Never mind. That sounds a lot.
Yeah, it's plenty. And our national debt clock. So there's an advocacy group that keeps track of the national debt, and they had a clock ticker. Well, it broke because they ran out of digits recently. They have to add an extra digit because we passed. Yeah, we passed the $1 trillion mark, which again, compared to the US, is small, but for a country of 30 million people, yeah, it's all relative. Our public and private debt versus the gross domestic product of the entire country is at 387%. So the amount of productivity in the entire country, there is 387% of that worth of debt in the country, which is insane. And just to put it in perspective, this is higher than the Greek debt crisis, and it's higher than the peak of the housing and the housing bubble in the States in terms of debt to GDP ratio. We're higher than both of those. So we're on this crash course. And beyond that, we are the only G7 nation that has zero gold reserves, like zip. In fact, out of the G7 nations, we're the only one to have less than 100 tons of gold as a reserve. We got rid of it as of 2016. The last of our gold is gone. We sold it all.
Oh wow!
It's unbelievable. So like we're in this really precarious spot where there's so much debt, there's nothing to back it up, and we're not slowing down. I mean, the U.S. is similar, but being a world reserve currency, they've probably got a little bit more of a runway before they fly off that cliff. We're probably a little bit closer to that. So I look at those numbers and they scare the hell out of me. But again, this is why something like Bitcoin exists, because if you're holding dollars, if you're holding Canadian dollars, like why would you want to hold those fiat debt coupons, right? You want to have like a sound money. And for me, I live on Bitcoin now. I hold as few dollars as possible.
So would you say you're entirely unbanked or not? You hold a few dollars to pay your bills and so on?
Yeah. So do I have a bank account? Yes. I hold as few dollars as possible. I get paid almost exclusively in Bitcoin. If somebody wants to pay me in dollars, I charge a premium, and then I utilize
Look at
various
you.
ramps in order to, like, I'll use here in Canada. There's a couple options like Bull Bitcoin or Bitcoin Well, and both of those allow you to pay any bill or fund any bank account using Bitcoin. And so I calculate my bills at the beginning of the month. I say, okay, this is coming out of this account. And as soon as I get paid, I'll swap it over. So it's sitting there. And the rest that's in savings is outside of the dollar. Like I don't use it. And then I use things like Bit Refill or coin cards or whatever to get day-to-day expenses. And so, yeah, am I jumping through hoops? Absolutely. But
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I'm not holding dollars and I'm better off because of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. So how do you just deal with taxes then? So if you get paid in Bitcoin, do you then have to transfer it to dollars so that you can then calculate it and then transfer it back to Bitcoin? I ask because that's something I'm personally trying to figure out myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, I'm not an accountant. So I have an accountant.
We
So,
were no financial advice.
yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
Disclaimer's done.
Yeah. So effectively, you have to worry about two different types of taxes in that instance. So there's income tax, right? So whatever you got paid, the dollar equivalent at that moment, you should account for that, and you should probably convert that and have it sit there for tax time. Okay. So then that's all dealt with, and you have your Bitcoin that you is actually spendable, that you is your take home pay, your net. Whatever you save of that and whatever you don't spend immediately on bills or convert immediately for bills, if that goes up in value, then you also have to consider capital gains tax. So in Canada currently, whatever you make, let's say I saved $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and it turned into $2,000 worth of Bitcoin, I made an extra $1,000. And in Canada, 50% of that is taxable. That doesn't mean they stealed 50% of it. It means that half of that, so $500 of the 1,000 that I made, is now considered as income and then goes into like my yearly income, and that gets taxed at whatever my tax rate is.
So just so I understand, you pay 50% on capital gains tax
No,
or
so
not? Did I misunderstand that?
no, it's kind of like saying that part of your income, they can only apply taxes to half of it. So they're not going to take the total amount. It's kind of like, instead of saying I made $1,000, I only, to the government, they're saying, well, 500 of that you keep tax free, and the other 500 of it, if your tax rate is like 25%, we'll tax 25% of the other half.
Oh, sorry. So they take 50% and then they tax that 50%.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, taxes suck, right? Nobody likes taxes. They suck. But if
some people do, I got to just put that out there. I've seen on Twitter, but anyway.
I suppose so. Yeah. But at the end of the day, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, if I'm paying a capital gains tax, that means there's two routes I could have gone. I could have saved my dollars and they could have been depreciated from beneath me, and I could have gotten effectively nothing for that. Or I could have saved my Bitcoin. When I decide to convert it or spend it, there is a gain on that, and then I'm paying tax on that. But just by the fact that I'm paying tax, it means I'm already better off than I was had I just held the dollars.
Oh, I'm absolutely with you. I think you're absolutely jumping through hoops, but it's worth it, instead of having your money just sitting there and losing value. And the thing is, like, we don't talk about that hidden tax at all. We don't talk about it. And I think it's the most, when you go into crypto, especially for someone at my age, because I'm in my 20s, so cryptocurrency really is the first time I sort of went into crypto, and then I understood finance, right? So it was the other way around, just because of my age and so on. So it's just so fascinating, because nobody talks to you about inflation. Nobody sort of says to you, okay, you can work your 9 to 5, and just because you save and just because you're not greedy and you're good doesn't mean that you're going to be rich at the end of the day. I know this might sound ridiculous, but for me, I just think it says it all. But some people will sort of say, well, that's inflation. But my grandfather bought his house back in 1950s for £3,000. And now I think it's worth, I don't know, like, he lives in like the north of England, so I don't know, maybe it's worth like £300,000 or something like that. Yeah. It blows my mind, but nobody talks about it.
Yeah, well, it's crazy because I mean, you see it in some basic items, but you see a lot of inflation in assets, things like housing, things like stocks. Like the stock market rally is not at so much of a rally as it is assets that shelter you from inflation inflating themselves, right? So it's kind of when new money gets created, you got to look at where that money flows to. If it just flowed out equally to everybody, then it would kind of be like a zero-sum game, because your percentage of the pie, money is just kind of meant to measure all of the goods and services in an economy. If everybody's percentage of the pie remained the same, but everybody just like added a zero to how many dollars you have, you're no worse or no better than you were before. It doesn't matter. But it's because money gets printed and then funneled to certain people that wealth gap keeps growing. And you see, things like assets where your grandfather was able to use £3,000, which, obviously takes a while to save up, but you could have done it. He was able to purchase that house, and now people lock in for 30-year mortgages to do the same thing. So we're fueled by debt to attain the same standard of living that people used to have. And just because we're kind of, technology has moved quicker, so we have all these cool gadgets and everything, and we have nice homes and things like that if you can afford one, but to attain that same level every year, it's harder and harder to do so. And the inflation that gets told to us, those levels are far from the truth. Like in Canada here, there was StatsCan did a study and they said, inflation's only been 0.5% for the past few years, which is total trash, because when they count inflation, they don't include food, they don't include fuel or homes, like housing, all of those important things that you kind of really need day to day. They don't count those things. So if you actually want to know what inflation is at or get a better picture of it, there's a really good website called the Chapwood Index. And this actually breaks it down city by city, I think just in the US. But it takes the top 500 items that the average person in that locale purchases day to day. And it adds up the inflation of those over the calendar year. So if you want to see what actually people are spending and the real inflation that they experience just to maintain their standard of living, it's closer to 12% a year. It's crazy. And that's not even including like assets like stocks and stuff like that.
And I think, even a number like that, I just don't think it would be enough to wake people up, because at the end of the day, if you're not taught something, you're just not going to know it. And that is why I personally feel so privileged to have fallen into this space, because I actually didn't initially choose to be here. And then I decided to stay. So I think I just feel so privileged, honestly, to be here and to be aware of these things, because like we said, it's that hidden tax. And, just because you save, it really doesn't mean anything. But speaking of Bitcoin, I feel like we got to talk about it. We got to talk about the market. So, gosh, it's been a bit of a ride, hasn't it? So we passed the all-time high. Then we did all-time high after all-time high. Then we hit 42K. That was fab. And then we retraced, what was it, like 28%? Some people are expecting 27K. So just give us your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we look historically at kind of what happened last time around in the bull run 2017, it's pretty par for the course. In fact, we've been shy of the pullbacks that we've seen previously. So through the whole bull run of 2017, there were 7 pullbacks in and around, in some cases up to like 38, around 40%, somewhere in that realm. Happened 7 times over. We haven't hit that. I think hitting that would have been closer to 25 or 26K in that realm would have been that pullback. Maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure. But even still, if we were to drop to 26K in a few days, I wouldn't be particularly worried about it. The other thing to think about is if you think that history will rhyme, then you got to look at the lengths of those pullbacks too. And some of them were as long as 55 days. Some of them were kind of like, I'd say between 40 and 55 days was kind of the average. And so far it's been about 20. So we're kind of like smack dab in the middle of that. If history rhymes, then within a few weeks, we might see us right back up there at 42 and then blowing through it. So time will tell. This feels very familiar to me. It feels like a rehash, but I'm not freaking out about this at all. I've just been sitting back and relaxing.
Enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I think, I mean, it's been pretty insane because people aren't really sure which kind of market we're in, right? I think you and I are like bull market. Then I think it was CNN that put out the headline that was 28% crash. Now we're in a bear market. I mean, Bitcoin sort of moving sideways. So how long does it need to move sideways for until we sort of determine this a bear market? If we don't get that, correction, I guess it's already corrected, but if it doesn't go back up to where it was.
Well, first off, CNBC or CNN is CNN.
I think it was CNN. I think it was CNN.
Yeah. Okay. So they're measuring they're measuring bear market by the traditional definition of it, which is a 20% drop.
Okay.
If that's their measurement, then we had 7 bear markets during 2017. So, take that as with a grain of salt. If we sat at kind of this level, if we traded sideways for like 4 months or something, I'd be like, it's definitely different. Maybe things take longer now. Maybe it's not going to be those kind of quick ups and downs. I'm doubtful. I've seen some people saying how this time it's going to be different. We've got, institutional interest, different kinds of money coming in. And so there's, we're not going to see that eventual bear market. I don't know. Companies are still run by people. I think we're still going to see the crazy volatility. I think we're still going to see the kind of run that we saw in 2017. I don't know to what extent, but, the calls of like multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars from a lot of different institutions and individuals, I don't think those are unreasonable whatsoever. I would not be surprised to see them. I'd be very excited. It's one thing talking about it versus experiencing it. But if we were to get to those levels, yeah, absolutely. I could easily see us seeing like another 60, 70, 80% bear market that dragged on for another couple of years. But then if we survive that, then next time, instead of institutions, it's nation states, right? Like I think we're just, it repeats. Yeah. It's like watching Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, where he wakes up and it's the same day every day. It's that, but it's 4-year Bitcoin epochs.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's exciting. I think it was Samson Mao that said, on the run up to 100K, we're going to get these 20-30% pullbacks. When things were running back in January, earlier in January, people were 100K this year, 100% Q1 2021, sort of predicting it at the end of Q1, let's say like March. I'm not going to ask for a price prediction, but give one if you feel. But do you think that 100K is even likely this year? I mean, I think 100K is likely in the grand scheme of life, but in the grand scheme of 2021, is it how likely do you think it is?
If somebody's top target is 100K this year, I think they're bearish.
I love it.
Like that's my sentiment. Like that's again, and I could be wrong. Like it could be like people say, and it's going to be more drawn out. But I don't think so. Everything seems to be very similar to 2017, and like we're like 50% above the all-time high. At one point, we had doubled the all-time high. In 2017, we went from 1K to 20 in the course of a calendar year. We did it basically. If you actually look at like the all-time high, it was around 1,200. So we did like a 17x or something like that easily in 2017. The difference now is that you have institutions actually draining liquidity from exchanges and actually keeping it on their books, which means if retail FOMO hits, then how do exchanges handle that? There just won't be enough. So could we see a mania to multiple hundred thousands? Yeah, like if the conditions are right. You know, what happens when there's a Wall Street bet sentiment on shorting the dollar and buying Bitcoin?
I'm so ready for that. I'm ready for that.
Me too.
Because someone just put a request into Reddit for me. But I like that you're bullish. I need to let my brother know, actually, because he bought in at 40K, bless him. But he's good. He's calm. He's chill. He's smart. Okay. He knows he's in it for the long run, so it's chill. Yeah. So let's talk about institutions jumping into Bitcoin, because I think that is what has made everything very different this time around. Michael Saylor has obviously sort of taken the lead with that. But an interesting thing that I want to talk about is how important is that, do you think, for the price? So what happens if Michael Saylor turns around and says, you know, I've made enough. I bought in, the average price I bought in was at, let's say, 15, 16, 17K, the average price. And he leaves. I don't think he will, but what happens if he leaves? Are we sort of resting on institutions?
I mean, yeah, well, people with a lot of money can afford to move the price currently, right? You know, if somebody's moving, you know, he was able to strategically position himself in the market without moving it too much. You know, and so I think we're still kind of at that stage, but liquidity is indeed drying up. Now, what happens when one institution turns around and dumps? Well, one already did. Because of the FUD, and maybe we'll get to that later. But there, you know, there's a double spend FUD article, and one of the companies that bought some Bitcoin, I think they bought like 100 and something Bitcoin, and then they dumped it. Are we immune to that kind of stuff? No, obviously not. Again, companies are run by people, and people can do stupid things sometimes. What happens if Michael Saylor turns around and sells? Well, he sells it to somebody who wants it more than him. So, you know, wild. do you know, if Michael Saylor is selling his Bitcoin and all the Bitcoiners are buying it back up, well, are they going to give it up later? Like whose hands, who are they transferring Bitcoin to? Right now, you have people that sold 40K, and you have Guggenheim, which was projecting $400,000 Bitcoin that isn't allowed to buy until the end of January, saying, well, we hit 35K, which was a technical turnaround point. So maybe time to take some money off the table. Screw you guys. You guys can't buy yet. You said 400K. You're just wanting the market to dip so that you can buy some cheap corn. Like that's.
Well, didn't they predict? They were the ones that predicted 20K the other day, no? Guggenheim Partners.
Yeah, they might have been.
Yeah, they predicted 20K the other day. And I'm like, I did a video about it on TikTok. I was like, come on, like everybody knows you want to buy Bitcoin and now you're predicting 20K.
Yeah. They know you want to buy and they know you can't buy yet. What, like, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. This is exactly what you would expect from somebody like that is waiting to buy in the sidelines and can't yet. They're going to say some stuff to maybe kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, yeah, it's laughable.
I said it, but I didn't say it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the FUD. That's something I also want to talk to you about. Yeah. So for those that missed it, give us the lowdown. What happened?
Okay, so BitMEX research noticed something funky on the blockchain where there appeared to be coins that were spent in two places at once. And somebody kind of caught on to this, and the headline was effectively Bitcoin may be broken because somebody was able to spend their money twice. And this is not correct. And so let me just kind of give you an idea of what actually happened. So Bitcoin itself is kind of all about obtaining consensus on who owns what. And that can take different amounts of time. Typically, within a single block or 10 minutes, you get an updated state of the ledger of who owns what. Okay. And you can be fairly certain that that's how it's going to be. And that moving forward, as more blocks of transactions are added to that, it becomes very difficult to change that. On occasion, two miners at the same time will mine a block of transactions. So there may be slightly different transactions in one than the other. And at this point, you're never quite sure which transactions are going to be officially added to the Bitcoin blockchain in what order. And so it takes until the next block of transactions is mined where you can be reasonably sure, okay, well, this is going to be the chain moving forward. That happened, but in that happening, somebody also used a feature of Bitcoin called RBF, or replace by fee. And this allows you to broadcast a transaction. And if you decide that it's taking too long, you can add a bigger fee. Or if you'd like to change where those funds are going, you can actually add a higher fee in the hopes that that transaction will get picked up instead. So somebody was sending money to a wallet. They changed their mind about the amount and where they wanted that money to go. So they used RBF, or replace by fee, to broadcast another version of that transaction that went somewhere else. At the same time they did that, both transactions were mined separately in those separate blocks. So there was a period in time where we weren't sure which one was going to be official. And as soon as the next block was mined, it was official that this was the winning transaction and that one was no longer valid. So
I'm just a quick question. I'm just going to jump in. So when you say, one transaction here, one transaction, so it was the same coin asking for a different thing.
Yeah, it was, hey, I originally wanted to send my coins here and I broadcast that and it was mined. But then I also had broadcast an alternative transaction and that one was mined separately at the same time. And so for a moment in time, we weren't sure which one was going to be the official transaction.
Understood.
It turns out that the lower fee one actually won, funny enough. But anyways, as soon as that next block was mined, the old transaction was no longer valid and was gone. And so this is actually just how Bitcoin works. It's all just waiting until you can be sure of where the funds are. It's all about the consensus of who owns what. So the people that were freaking out about it just didn't understand how Bitcoin worked. And it's literally a function of the network.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So at the end of it, really, it's all about what was confirmed, and only one was confirmed, not two transactions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now there's it's called an orphan block. So that's what it was.
Okay.
They were valid transactions at the time, but based on where the chain went, that block is no longer valid. It just kind of sits there and is not included in the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay, so speaking of FUD, there's also been some Tether FUD. Could you clear that one up for us? Because I think you are very eloquent in the way that you explain these confusing things. So let's get on to Tether.
Yeah, so Tether, I mean, it's such a rehash of everything we heard in 20. This is why I think that it's going to be the same as 2017, because even the FUD is just like repeating. It's on repeat. Well, Tether... there's always been rumors that effectively Tether is a stable coin that is printed from nothing specifically to pump the price of Bitcoin. That's kind of the general thesis behind it. For a long time, there were rumors that Tether was not backed 1-to-1 by dollars. They refuted that claim. Eventually, they actually did move to a model where they say they can have dollars or equivalent value assets. And so, I mean, the number one question: is Tether backed 1-to-1 by dollars or equivalent? I mean, I don't know for sure. I have no idea. But let's kind of reel it back and look at the implications of what people are saying. Tether designed specifically to pump Bitcoin, and that's why it's created there. So if that's the case, why did they stop in 2018, 2019 and only restart in 2020? Like that's the first question. Like, why stop? If it was working, why stop? Because Tether has been around for a while. The other principle that I want to touch on is, just because let's say that all the rumors are true. Let's say Tether just effectively had nothing and we're printing fake dollars. I mean, one, that's already happening with the real dollars. So, but let's draw a comparison to, let's say, dollars and gold. Because they've printed so many dollars since we went off the gold standard in 71, does that make gold any less valuable? Now, at the time when we went off the gold standard, it was $35 were worth 1 ounce of gold. Now it's around 2,000 because we've printed so much money. You know, is gold less valuable because more dollars exist to represent it? In my opinion, it's kind of, you found a sly way to get somebody to hand over a valuable asset in exchange for a non-valuable asset. But I very much doubt that Tether single-handedly drives the price of Bitcoin, because if that was the game, they would at one point have to exchange that Bitcoin for dollars if that's what their game plan was. I just don't see it.
Okay.
Not all of it adds up to me. It seems like it's just garbage FUD.
Yeah, no. I get that. And I think a lot of this stuff has already been dispelled in the last few weeks. But it's good to go over. So speaking of FUD and I guess people that don't like Bitcoin, let's bring up our best friend, Peter Schiff. So someone like Peter Schiff, what is going on, because he's kind of making, of course he's made a name for himself because of gold. Like I'm not gonna dispute that, but he's also making a name for himself for being this anti-Bitcoin person. Somebody who says you can't buy anything with Bitcoin and then lets you buy things on his website using cryptocurrencies, which is fun. So do you even, where does his hate come from? A part of me feels, I think he owns Bitcoin. What do you think?
I don't think he owns Bitcoin, to be honest.
His son does.
Yeah, his son does. I love that so Spencer Schiff, his son, definitely does. And I love that. So, I always say whenever I'm talking about Peter Schiff and his son, I say, short Schiff Gold and long Schiff Sats, because I want his son to create a company called Schiff Sats. I think that would be poetic. But besides the fact, Peter Schiff he's just entrenched, right? Like his whole life has been dedicated to a lot of the fundamental reasoning why that drive Bitcoiners and why we believe in Bitcoin. But he can't fathom the idea that something has come along and done what gold does, but better, and has corrected the weaknesses in gold that led to the abolition of the gold standard, right? It was physical, it was easily centralized, and it wasn't easily divisible. So we had to abstract away via paper notes. And that led to people creating more paper notes than gold. Bitcoin, you don't have that problem because it's just so divisible. And even when you get down to a single sat level, you jump to Lightning Network and you can divide those. So, it does away with that inherent centralization. Now, do people leave Bitcoin on exchanges? Absolutely. But easily auditable as well. So like if you have a bunch of funds that buy a Bitcoin and they all claim to have, X amount of Bitcoin, you start doing the math and it adds up to 30 million Bitcoin, something's up and you might want to pull out your money very quickly. So yeah, like he's just a perma bear, and it's because of his entrenched interests. I framed a tweet of his. Hold on.
No, you did? Oh my God.
I framed it in gold. not real
Which
gold.
one is it?
Not real
Read it for us.
So he tweeted this on January 6th of 2020. And he said, for those Bitcoin bugs excited about Bitcoin's 4% rally in 2020, think about this. Gold is also up by about the same percentage this year, only with significantly less downside risk. If this is the best rally Bitcoin can muster, how will it ever hit 50K, let alone 1 million? And this thing is aging like milk in the hot sun. Like it's hilarious how bad of a call this was. Like 4% up. We were like 7 or 8K when he tweeted this.
Wait, what date? Sorry, what date was that?
This was January 6th of 2020.
Oh, I thought you said 2021.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. My bad. Yeah. Wow.
So this has been sitting on my shelf for a year, and it's going to sit there for many more.
Wait, you need to like, have you told him, or does he know that?
Oh yeah, I tweet him all the time. I take like pictures of me on my pillow snuggling it. It's great. I love it.
I love the call for 50K. That's brilliant, because 1 year later we were just $8,000 away.
Yeah, my guess is that that tweet, part of it, the first call is obliterated this year, and then within 5 years, the second call is obliterated.
That's wild. I freaking love that. That's so funny. But speaking of all this stuff, then it'll be really cool to hear your thoughts on Bitcoin's place in. I always feel like saying the world to come. That sounds really weird. It sounds like some religious way of saying it. But in the next few decades, where do you see Bitcoin? You know, you mentioned the Lightning Network, but people often say Bitcoin can't scale. The Lightning Network is a failed project and so on. So is it a store of value? Is it a global reserve currency? Is it a day-to-day payments solution? What is Bitcoin these days, or what's it going to be?
Eventually, all of those things.
Really?
But I think you've got to have priorities, and you've got to protect the base layer so that it can become all of those things. And that means that base layer transactions may at times be expensive. So again, I've already kind of alluded to it in the show, but I live on Bitcoin. So, and people say that it's unusable and you can't use it day to day. I literally do it every day. So you're wrong. But besides that,
you're wrong.
So, you know, like, what am I interested in first and foremost? Well, I want sound money. I want a separation of money and state. I want censorship resistance. I want immutability of the actual underlying code so that I know the rules governing it that say it's limited, can't be screwed with, and can't be easily changed. You know, I want it secured via, you know, a consensus algorithm that is not easily gamed. So for me, the only viable option for that is proof of work, because it's prohibitively expensive to attack the network. And then I want it to be easily verifiable via my own node, which I'm running a Bitcoin node right behind me, and all of my wallets connect to that. And I also want it to be leaderless. Like, I don't want to see the CEO plastered. I don't want to see the creator plastered somewhere. I don't want them to be able to influence the market, because in a lot of instances, when there's a figurehead or there's a foundation, when they say jump, everybody holding it says how high. And so they get in these kind of deity-like positions where they can influence it, even if they don't intend to. So I want all of those things. And when I take that litmus test and I test it against anything outside of Bitcoin, I don't see it. It doesn't tick all of those boxes for me. And so that's why I'm centered around Bitcoin.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's interesting. A lot of Bitcoiners do say they see Bitcoin becoming everything. I definitely wholeheartedly see Bitcoin as gold 2.0, as that store of value, as that way to opt out. I'm not saying no, but for me, I'm yet to sort of be fully convinced, and I'm really excited to see if Bitcoin really could be the global reserve currency, if it really could be that day-to-day payment solution. Because if so, then that's amazing. You know, if we could be like paying taxes in Bitcoin and just keeping everything in Bitcoin, because right now, like you said, jumping through hoops, it is a lot. So ideally, that's what I would also like. I'm not 100%, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited to find out.
Yeah, I you know, it's not a for sure thing. Like, obviously, it's not 100% certain that's going to happen. I think we're leaning that way. But I guess to answer your previous question of where is it going, I think we have to go after that store of value and secure that kind of like reasoning on the base layer first before we can easily obtain those other things like easy day-to-day payments. Now, I use Lightning Network every day. Is it like the easiest thing in the world? Well, it's gotten a hell of a lot easier since I first used it 2 years ago. You know, you can auto swap in and out, and it's still cheap and fast, but you know, there's work to be done, obviously. But I'm not as concerned about having to jump through those hoops as long as the sanctity of that base layer value proposition as sound money that is separate from the state is maintained. And all of those things that I just talked about, I think, are entirely necessary to be preserved in order to attain that.
Okay, so coming towards the end of this, you can answer this one quickly, because then I want to talk about you and what you're working on next. But I want to know your opinion on which cryptocurrency you think is going to take us mainstream. So I think things are going to go mainstream. You're probably going to say Bitcoin, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Things are going to go mainstream. I hear 2023 is going to be the year. I hear that from a tech perspective. I hear it from a fundamentals perspective. And then I also hear from like a spiritual perspective. You know, I'm hearing 2023 is the year. So which cryptocurrency is going to do it? I mean, Doge is a bit of a meme. Things like Link are doing some really things like Link coins. The coin Link sounds kind of weird when I say it. Link is doing some really cool stuff. So which crypto do you think will take us mainstream, and what are your thoughts?
I mean, you called my answer. Yes, Bitcoin. Again, I'm not super convinced by anything else given the criteria that I laid out. So like, okay, let's take Link for instance. You know, a lot of that has to do with pulling off-chain data, pulling data in the real world from oracles and putting that onto the blockchain. So with that, you can't get past the fact that bad data can, in some circumstances, be put onto the blockchain. It's possible to have bad data input when you're taking it from a real world source. And so if that actually gets onto a blockchain, then some of that data on the blockchain, which is meant to be kind of a beacon of truth, becomes incorrect. If you can go back and amend that data and correct it, then why are you using a blockchain in the first place? So I've always kind of I've never been sold on kind of this real world off-chain data on chain as a use case, because, and the supply chain stuff, because the inputs can potentially be bad. And if you can fix those inputs to make them correct, then a blockchain is completely useless to you. So things like that.
But just on that point, though, I mean, I wouldn't say entirely useless, because, you know, they're using things like smart contracts and decentralized exchanges and all these sorts of things that we need blockchain for. But I understand how the information can be incorrect. But what if they're able to get to a point whereby they make sure that it's not incorrect?
Well, I mean, how do you do that? So like, I know that there's mechanisms to with Link, there'll be, and with other chains, there'll be mechanisms to try to penalize people that do things maliciously. What happens in instances of like civil attack, where the vast majority of people agree to collude together to do things that are not necessarily true? You know, like there's attack vectors that can be had there. I haven't been convinced with off-chain data being used on-chain. I think the reason that something like Bitcoin works is because it's purely digital. It's a native digital asset. And so you don't need to audit what's in the real world in order to know that what's in front of you is true. So yeah, like I'll listen to different things when people pitch it, but I haven't heard very different pitches as of yet. And so I'm kind of, I don't know. I'll say that my skepticism is thought through. I'm always open to hearing other things, but to date, when I list off the criteria where I think that something is valid, I just haven't seen that opposing argument yet.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think, I mean, Bitcoin for me is definitely number one. I definitely do see blockchain technology being used outside of sort of the Bitcoin landscape. I'm definitely someone who sort of sees the use case of it in countries that don't have the kind of financial infrastructure that we have, in terms of, you know, getting mortgages and loans and things like that. You know, like I get the DeFi craze. I get it. But it's still super new. It's super experimental. You know, I'm with you in terms of it hasn't proven itself entirely, because like you said, there are still holes in sort of making sure that the blockchain is doing what the blockchain is supposed to do: immutable, accurate, transparent, and so on. So I'm with you. I'm yet to see. So just finally, this has been a fantastic chat. But finally, what are you up to? And also, where can people find you? So just promote yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been doing tutorials on my YouTube channel since 2016 now, so it's going on 5 years. So I do multiple videos a week, whether it be tutorials or one-on-one interviews or panel shows. So I always do those. You can find me just searching BTC Sessions on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at BTC Sessions. And you can find my website, btcsessions.ca, that Canadian Canadian suffix there. So yeah, you can find me all over the place. And yeah, I'm just doing my thing. I'm making shows and enjoying being around and doing what I love.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. You're an absolutely fantastic guest. You're so eloquent. You explained everything beautifully. And I think it's so important to break down these complex topics, because for some people, you know, we hear double spend and, you know, people think, oh, yeah, I get it. But a lot of people don't, especially what's going on with Gamestop and Robinhood and why that matters to our community. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And guys, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my sponsors. We will see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.